Trauma-based mind control is a term often used to describe the idea that extreme psychological or physical trauma can be deliberately used to fragment, condition, or manipulate a person's thoughts and behaviors. Documented history shows that intelligence agencies, most notably the CIA during the MK-Ultra program the 1950s and 1960s, experimented with drugs, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, and coercive interrogation to study whether human behavior could be altered or controlled under trauma. The mind tends to encode memories more powerfully and more rigidly than under normal circumstances. This is because the brain's stress response, especially the release of adrenaline and cortisol, heightens arousal and forces attention onto immediate threats. The amygdala becomes more active, prioritizing survival-related information, while the hippocampus works to form lasting impressions of the event, so the person can recognize and avoid similar danger in the future. Trauma can therefore create memories that persist more strongly than everyday recollections. Research and documentation associated with the Five Eyes and Israeli government, military, and intelligence sectors describe programs concerned with behavior modification, hypnosis, trauma-induced dissociation, and attempts to influence cognition through psychological, chemical, and electromagnetic means. Archival materials, declassified files, and witness accounts describe efforts to map the limits of psychological coercion, induce amnesia, manipulate identity states, and develop both local and remote methods for altering perception, memory, and behavior. Intelligence studies and operational reporting at a further layer involving the cyber domain, describing the use of artificial intelligence systems, automated influence platforms, botnet infrastructures, and large-scale data-driven targeting to shape cognition remotely. These sources outline methods for psychological manipulation delivered through social media ecosystems, including voice, video, and data-based messaging calibrated to exploit behavioral vulnerabilities and elicit specific emotional or cognitive responses. Contemporary analyses depict ongoing research into stress response psychology, covert and clandestinely administered trauma, trauma memory interactions, and technological systems designed to identify, leverage, or manipulate neurophysiological and informational weak points across both physical and digital environments. Governments fund a wide range of technological and administrative programs through taxpayer revenue, including systems for digital identification, financial infrastructure, and environmental monitoring. Research, design, and development for these initiatives are effectively conducted on the general population, who serve as both the subjects and eventual users of the resulting technologies. Such systems, when combined with proposals for central bank digital currencies and carbon tracking frameworks, form the basis of a comprehensive governance architecture that is currently being deployed against the public itself. The combined effect is described as the construction of an open-air concentration camp for future generations. Hypnosis transmitted through electronic media as historical precedent, beginning with the BBC's 1946 closed-circuit experiment, in which hypnotist Peter Casson induced trance states in studio volunteers through a television camera feed. Reports from the time indicate that multiple subjects entered a hypnotic sleep, prompting the BBC to cancel plans for a public broadcast due to concerns that viewers at home could be affected without a hypnotist present to safely terminate the induction. CIA Document 190,684 is a declassified 𝗧𝗿𝗱𝗶𝗁𝗱𝗏 report from the early 1950s that records CIA experimentation with deep hypnosis, behavioral suggestion, amnesia, and covert induction techniques. The document confirms that test subjects were repeatedly hypnotized, made to perform complex tasks while in trance, moved freely around facilities, passed guards, and later retained no memory of their actions. It further describes successful induction of trance by telephone, subtle signals, written cues, and code words. as well as the use of hypnotized individuals as unwilling couriers. The report acknowledges that these capabilities were experimentally demonstrated decades later. The 2002 Scottish telemedicine trial demonstrated that therapeutic hypnosis delivered via video conferencing could be as effective as in-person treatment, with many patients reporting equal or even greater comfort and responsiveness to remote induction together. These examples show that hypnotic states, defined as focused attention, reduced peripheral awareness, and heightened responsiveness to suggestion, can be elicited through purely audio-visual channels when the subject is attentive and receptive. While these demonstrations do not imply involuntary mass mind control, they do establish that altered states of consciousness can be produced remotely, provided that the necessary cognitive conditions are met. Modern neuroscience provides a clear explanation for how hypnosis produces its characteristic effects. Functional MRI, EEG, and MEG studies show that hypnosis suppresses activity in the brain's default mode network, which supports self-monitoring, reflective thought, and internal narrative. As this network quiets, connectivity strengthens between executive attentional regions and the salience network, creating a condition of deep absorption and narrowed focus simultaneously. Activity in conflict monitoring and executive oversight areas of the prefrontal cortex decreases, reducing internal resistance to suggestion and allowing hypnotic instructions to be experienced as more automatic. These neural mechanisms explain why hypnotic suggestions can shape perception, memory, and involuntary responses in susceptible individuals without overriding volition or creating total behavioral control. Trauma interacts with these same neural systems in a distinct but related way. During traumatic events, the amygdala triggers a surge of stress hormones such as adrenaline, cortisol, and norepinephrine, which place the brain into a high alert state that prioritizes survival. This neurochemical environment forces the hippocampus to encode sensory detail with exceptional intensity, creating flashbulb memories that feel vivid and intrusive long after the event. At higher stress levels, hippocampal function becomes impaired, producing fragmented, state-dependent, or partially inaccessible memories. Dissociation emerges when cortical integration fails and consciousness decouples from emotional, sensory, or autobiographical processing, forming separate memory compartments or identity states. Because trauma amplifies both emotional imprinting and neural plasticity, it strengthens associative learning and can produce long-lasting conditioned responses to cues present during the traumatic event. When trauma and hypnosis coincide, their effects can reinforce each other in ways examined clinically and historically, with trauma increasing suggestibility, narrowing attention, heightening state-dependent memory formation, and promoting dissociative shifts, while hypnosis amplifies attentional gating, reduces critical filtering, and can induce amnesia or selective recall. Together, these states can produce stronger conditioning, more rigidly compartmentalized memory networks, and deeper dissociative pathways. In this framework, trauma-based influence is understood through the brain's mechanisms for encoding and retrieving memories under acute stress, in which heightened amygdala activity and stress hormone surges create intensely encoded sensory fragments, while hippocampal impairment generates contextual gaps, distortions, or dissociation. Layering hypnosis onto a traumatized or highly stressed mind increases susceptibility to suggestion by combining narrowed focus, reduced critical filtering, and a structured channel for shaping associations or behavioral responses. Historically, intelligence services examined whether these interactions could be exploited under controlled conditions, and the CIAS hypnotic tests, according to document 190,684, described attempts to use trance states to facilitate amnesia, trigger behavioral routines, and strengthen conditioned reactions to cues. Neurologically, trauma and hypnosis interact through overlapping pathways involving the amygdala, emotional tagging, hippocampus, memory integration, prefrontal cortex, executive control, and the brain's dissociative stress circuitry. Under trauma, the prefrontal cortex's regulatory control weakens, making the mind more prone to compartmentalization and automatic responses. Hypnosis similarly reduces activity in regions responsible for critical evaluation and self-monitoring, allowing suggestions to be encoded with reduced interference. This combination can produce amnesia when traumatic stress disrupts hippocampal binding, while hypnotic suggestion directs the mind to block or dissociate certain memories. Conditioning arises when repeated pairings of cues with emotional states or post-hypnotic instruction strengthen specific neural pathways. Dissociation emerges from the brain's attempt to protect itself under overwhelming stress. When paired with hypnotic structuring, it can create state-dependent memory, compartmentalist awareness, and behavior that feels automatic or externally driven to the subject. Electromagnetic research adds another scientifically validated dimension to the discussion. The brain is an electrochemical organ that generates and responds to oscillatory electrical activity, and modern neuromodulation techniques demonstrate that external electromagnetic fields can influence neural function at close range. Transcranial magnetic stimulation is capable of inhibiting or exciting specific cortical regions, temporarily altering speech, movement, or memory. Transcranial electrical stimulation can shift cortical excitability, affect learning rates, modify perception of risk, or alter motor performance. Extremely low-intensity magnetic fields can entrain auroral oscillations, though only at very short distances with precisely tuned equipment. None of these techniques enable long-range remote control of complex cognition or behavior, but they confirm that neural circuits can be externally modulated, that brain states are sensitive to frequency-specific inputs, and that sensory channels remain potent pathways for targeted influence. Scientists have developed ways to influence animal brains using tiny particles, called nanoparticles, in experiments. These particles are placed in the brain, and then activated using magnets or light. For example, one system called NanoMind used magnetized particles to change behaviors in mice, such as eating or caring for their young. Other techniques use particles that generate small electric signals or respond to near-infrared light, allowing researchers to trigger specific brain activity and behaviors without surgery or genetic modification. Earlier studies showed that light-activated particles could stimulate neurons deep in the brain, producing predictable behavioral responses. Overall, research shows that nanoparticles can be used to remotely affect brain activity and control certain behaviors in animals under laboratory conditions. Publicly available scientific research represents only a fraction of what is being pursued in classified military, intelligence, and black project laboratories, while peer-reviewed studies demonstrate capabilities such as nanoparticle-mediated neural modulation in animals. Insiders and analysts suggest that programs operating under high-security conditions may be decades ahead, with some estimates placing classified developments anywhere from 50 to 100 years beyond what is disclosed in the open scientific literature. These programs are believed to integrate advanced materials, neurotechnologies, electromagnetic systems, and covert behavioral engineering methods in ways that are not accessible to the general scientific community, meaning the publicly documented state of the art may significantly underestimate the true capabilities being explored in secret laboratories. Trauma-based behavioral influence has been explored historically in intelligence and clinical research, most notably in the CIA SMK-Ultra and Artichoke programs, which examined hypnosis, drugs, sensory deprivation, and coercive stress as means of altering attention, memory, and suggestibility. Declassified materials, such as CIA document 190,684 record-induced trance states, amnesia, and behavioral routines performed without later recall. Neuroscientific findings now clarify these effects, Acute trauma heightens amygdala activation, floods the brain with stress hormones, and produces intensely encoded sensory fragments, while impairing hippocampal contextual integration, creating conditions under which associative learning is unusually strong. Hypnosis reduces activity in self-monitoring networks, increases attentional gating, and enhances responsiveness to suggestion. When trauma and hypnosis coincide, the combination of heightened arousal, narrowed focus, and reduced critical filtering can produce deep state-dependent encoding, making specific cues more memorable or behaviorally salient. Remote delivery of hypnotic, suggestive content has historical precedent, such as the BBC's 1946 closed-circuit television hypnosis experiment and later clinical studies of telehypnosis. And modern cyber-psychological research documents how targeted audio-visual content, algorithmic reinforcement systems, and bot-driven messaging can influence attention, emotion, and memory consolidation through repeated exposure. Electromagnetic neuromodulation technologies, including transcranial magnetic and electrical stimulation, demonstrate that external fields can modulate neural excitability, while experimental nanotechnologies, such as magnetogenetic interfaces and light-responsive nanoparticles, have shown in animal studies that injected nanomaterials can be activated by magnetic or optical stimuli to alter neural activity and behavior. These technologies demonstrated methods for population-level mind control. They illustrate the neurobiological pathways through which attention, memory, and suggestion can be shaped. In theory, a cue such as the phrase, turning point, could become strongly imprinted if introduced during a state of heightened arousal or narrowed attentional focus. Whether through trauma, hypnosis, or repeated, algorithmically amplified exposure, because these conditions enhance emotional tagging, associative binding, and long-term consolidation, making certain words or signals disproportionately salient within an individual's memory and perception.